This will be part one of a two-part video tour of my backyard orchard. I'll start here with my avocado. It's put on a good amount of new healthy looking leaves. Still no flower buds, but it is looking very healthy. And next is my Pakistan mulberry tree. I've been picking fruit off of this one each morning since around late April. I've had this tree for about 2 years, and this is the biggest fruit set that it's ever had. It's got quite a few that are ripe and ready to be picked, and it also has some that are still green and still developing. And over here is my Starfruit tree. It was recently transplanted and it's just getting over the transplant shock and it's starting to put out a good amount of leaves. And over here in this container is my Rio Red grapefruit tree. There's another one that was recently transplanted, and it's also doing well. It lost a few leaves, and a while back it did produce some flower buds, but only a small amount of fruit is setting, probably due to the transplant shock. And here's my Australian finger lime, which has put on a good amount of new leaves. If you've been following my channel, you've heard me talk about how this one lost all its leaves as a result of some strong winds through my area. And now, as you can see, it's got plenty of new growth and it's doing really well. And over here, these two are my Jujube trees. This one here in the front here put on a really heavy set of flowers. It's got just about every branch has some flowers on it. And this tree requires a pollinator. And the tree that's in the back, that one there, which is a Lee variety, is considered a good pollinator. I purchased these trees last year in January, and if they do fruit this season, it will be their first fruit set. This one has quite a bit of flowers, so hopefully I'll be able to get some fruit off of it. This other one also has a few flowers, but not nearly as many. This variety is self-pollinating, so hopefully some of these flowers will set some fruit. Maybe this season between both of these trees I'll be able to get a decent harvest. And here are my container grown grapevines. I'll list the variety on the screen as I go through these. This one here put on quite a bit of, started to develop quite a bit of clusters. They're still at the early stages, but it has several clusters forming throughout the whole vine. A few more on this side here as well. And this other vine here doesn't have nearly as many. There's just a few that are at the very early stages of development. Doesn't look like this one's gonna produce as many as the other one. And this last one here has the least amount of grapes developing between all of these. Don't think this one's going to produce much this season. Still at the early stages, so they it may develop a few more flower buds in the next few weeks, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a good harvest for this one. Now this one here on the other hand is a different story. This is my plain seedless grapevine. This one was planted in the ground over 2.5 years ago. Last season it produced just a handful of grapes. This season, however, it produced several flower clusters. They're pretty much scattered throughout the whole vine, and they're starting to develop early stages of development in some grapes. The vine also put out a lot of growth, so I went through and cut some of the vigorous growth off about a week ago. After doing that, some of the leaves started to turn yellow. I gave it a fish and seaweed foliar treatment, and it seems to be doing better. And it is developing a fairly large amount of grapes, as you can see. The leaves are still looking a little yellow. I'll probably go through and give it another foliar treatment. Hopefully that'll get this vine back on track again. Has several grape clusters on the other side of this Cavendish banana, which I will be removing sometime this season, probably towards the end of the season. But as you can see, there's several grape clusters here as well. And here's my Suriname cherry tree. This one's coming up on 3 years that it's nearly been planted here, and in all that time I've only been able to harvest a handful of cherries. Just doesn't seem to want to produce any. And here's my Barbedos Acerola Cherry tree. This tree was purchased a couple of years ago. It came in a 15-gallon container, and I never up-potted the tree, so no way of knowing how long it had been growing in that container. In early March, I noticed that the upper portion of the leaves of the tree were starting to turn yellow. I wasn't sure what the problem was, but I suspected it might be root bound. So I decided to put it in the ground. When the tree was removed from the container, it was clear that the roots had become root bound. Here's a short video of what it looked like. As you can see here, the roots had already circled around the pot. I had done a little research and found two methods of dealing with root-bound trees. The traditional method was to basically cut the roots that were circling. Another approach was to untangle the roots as best you could, provided they were not too thick in diameter. This method required, once you untangled them, to lay them out away from the root ball. And since the roots were fairly small in diameter, they were easy to work with, so I decided to use the second method and just untangle them as best I could and stretch them out away from the root ball as best I could. Shortly after putting it in the ground, the tree lost the majority of the leaves from the upper branches. Just about all the leaves fell off. I thought I was going to lose this tree, but recently it started to push out some new growth on the upper branches. As you can see, it has a small amount of new leaves that are starting to form, so it looks like the tree's going to survive. Hopefully it won't be too long before it pushes out a whole new flush of growth. And next, here's my Jaboticaba. This one was also recently transplanted. The leaves are slightly yellow, but it's doing fine. And this one here, next to the Jaboticaba, is my Lolita Suriname cherry tree, which was also recently transplanted. It lost a few leaves after transplanting, but it's doing well. And this is my plum tree that refuses to set any fruit. And here are my emperor lychee trees that are in bloom. They started to flower in early May. I've never had any fruit off of either of these trees. They've flowered in the past, but have never set any fruit. This time around, though, it looks like they might be early signs of some fruit development here. It's still at the very early stages, so who knows if it'll set any fruit again this season. They're still relatively young trees, but hopefully I'll get them to set some fruit. And next to the lychee trees is this cucumber plant. It's here in the back, and in the front here is this Kohala Longan tree that I recently transplanted. By the way, I recently picked a cucumber off of this pickling cucumber plant. It's supposed to be, the cucumbers are supposed to be picked when they're about 3 to 4 inches in length. And I waited a little bit too long. The one I picked was nearly 6 inches long, and it did not have good flavor at all. So hopefully future ones that I pick, I'll try and get to them sooner, and hopefully the taste will be better. But this last one was horrible tasting. And these two plants here, there's are honey butternut squash plants that are starting to develop some fruit, as you can see here. It has several scattered throughout the vine. And this other one over here on the end here, this is a summer butterstick squash. It's got a couple that are developing on there. And over here in this section I have 3 fig trees. 2 of them are starting to develop some figs. I also have some pepper plants that I recently planted here in this area. I have several different varieties growing. But back to the figs, this one here in the front is a Peter's honey, and it's just barely starting to develop some figs. This other one here in the back, this one is an Excel fig, and it's also starting to develop some figs. This one over here on this other side is a blackjack fig, and there's no fruit on this one yet. And over here, these are my cherry trees. Didn't get much of a harvest off of these, only about 25 or 30. Hopefully next season will be better. And here I have a couple of tomato plants and some fig cuttings that I have growing. And over here in the back is my Pitomba. This one's starting to develop some flower buds. I got a decent harvest off of this one last season, and it looks like this season it might do a little bit better. Seems to have more flower buds developing. Hopefully a good majority of these will reach maturity and I'll get another good harvest off of it. And that tree there in the back is my ice cream bean tree, which has been in the ground a little over a year. It's put on quite a bit of growth, but no fruit. Same with this one here, my Grumichama. It's been in the ground the same amount of time, and still haven't had any fruit set off of this one either. And here are my mango trees. These have all been in the ground for a little over a year. The one in the front is a coconut cream mango. It has several flower clusters, and I still haven't had any fruit set off of this one. If it does produce any fruit off of any of these buds, it'll be its first fruit set. This other one here is a cherry mango. It said a few mangoes last season, but a squirrel got to all but one. This past winter it lost several leaves. It was severely damaged by the cold weather, and when spring started, no new growth came in. I thought I was going to lose this tree, so a few weeks ago I decided to tip the leader branch. I cut a couple of inches off the top of the leader branch in the hope of encouraging some new side branching. And it looks like it worked. If you look here towards the bottom, there's some new growth that's coming in. So hopefully I'll get some good branching off of this and the tree will recover. And this last one here is a Glen mango. It also formed a small amount of flower buds, and if it sets any fruit off of these, it'll be its first fruit set. This one's doing well, and it's starting to push out some new growth. And here at the end of this section are my persimmon trees. The one in the front is a coffee cake persimmon. It started to bloom in late April, and there are several blooms that developed or starting to develop some fruit. Hopefully a good portion of these will reach maturity. It's still too early to tell if they're going to stay on, but it does have quite a few scattered throughout the branches. This other one here is my chocolate persimmon. It also began to bloom in late April. Not as many blooms on this one as the coffee cake, but it does have a few that are starting to develop. And this other persimmon on the other side over here, this is a fuyu persimmon. It also has a good amount of fruit that's at the early stages of development. This is a self-pollinating variety, so hopefully a good portion of these will reach maturity as well. I've never tasted a chocolate or coffee cake persimmon. I've tried the fuyu before, which has excellent flavor, but I'm hoping at least one of each of the chocolate and coffee cake will reach maturity, so I'll get a chance to sample and see what those taste like. We'll see. Well, that will be it for part 1 of this tour. I hope you enjoyed watching. If so, please give the video a thumbs up. Part 2 should be ready by sometime next week. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing so you can follow along. And as always, stay safe, grow your own, and thank you for watching.